Rockets and Knicks were in Game 5 when O.J. started that fateful drive. His four-way hazard lights were blinking, and no one knew what the Jews was thinking.
I've been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo, Toronto, Winslow, Sarasota, Wichita, Tulsa, Ottawa, Oklahoma, Tampa, Panama, Mattawa, La Paloma, Bangor, Baltimore, Salvador, Amarillo, Tocopilla, Barranquilla, and Padilla. I'm a killed. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Crossed the desert bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
This is Oversight Live, your advocate for good governance. We're putting the site back in. Oversight. Here's the watcher on the wall, your host, Ben Carpenter.
Good evening, Alaska. Welcome to Oversight Live. I am Ben Carpenter, your host. Welcome to this Monday evening. Thank you for joining us. Oversight Live is your road to Juneau until we can build one. You don't have to take a ferry. You just can sit there in your comfort of your home and watch what's happening in Juneau. Of course, you can go to KTOO, Gavel, Alaska, and watch the recordings on your own if you want and see. And if you want to sit up, follow the schedule, you can watch it live. Or we'll do what Oversight Live does, is bring you what I think is the pertinent, what you need to know. And then you can ask questions here. Can't get that anywhere else. This is it. We're streaming live on YouTube, X, and Facebook. And if you got questions or comments, you can chat right there and it'll come live to me, and I'll do my best to answer the questions. If you're watching the recording and you have questions, you can email me at producer@oversightlive.com, and I will do my best to answer your questions via email. And don't be surprised if I use your question online on live, because if it's a good question, somebody else has got that same question. The whole purpose of this is to increase our knowledge and awareness so that we can provide good oversight of our government. So we're going to try to have some fun too, because it's always fun to watch and see what's happening with people who should be responsible. All right. So recap. Legislature has been working on a conference committee, which has got 6 members on it, 3 from the House, 3 from the Senate. 2 of each of those from each body are majority members, and 1 is minority member from each body. Last Saturday, they met and had 2 meetings, a morning meeting and an afternoon meeting. And that was the last time they met. They did not meet today. My understanding is that there may be a committee substitute being drafted right now, and that's why they didn't have a meeting, or they're waiting for it to be drafted before they can have their meeting. Not entirely sure. If my sources are correct, some or all of the majority members met today, not in a publicized or public meeting, but they met to discuss. My understanding is the minority members were not invited, so possibly as many as 4 people met today to have a conversation. We have no way of knowing what happened there, because that's how it works in the legislature. They're still looking for compromise. And as a reminder, the bill that's before them is House Bill 381. And because this is a conference committee, it operates a little differently than most committees, where the committee can do whatever it wants to a bill. It can amend it however it wants. It can totally scrap it and replace it with a totally different bill if it wanted to. The conference committee cannot do that, though. The conference committee at this point is assuming, because the rest of the body have not had a floor session yet, so they haven't actually given them powers of free conference, limited powers of free conference. but the conference committee is acting as if they will be given those powers. And that means that they have the power. Well, let me back up and say that means that they have not found agreement on which version of the bill they want to use, the House bill or the Senate bill. Okay. They don't know. Cannot find agreement. So now they have to go line by line, provision by provision, and find out where the disagreement is. They set aside everything they agree on, and they make a list of all the things they disagree on. The legislature grants them limited powers of free conference for them to be able to pick and choose between the House version or the Senate version of the things that they disagree on. And that's all that this conference committee can do. It can't amend the bill. It can't change the language in the bill. All it can do is select a provision in the House version or a provision in the Senate version. Now, if they can't find agreement on the different provisions, then they have to go to the back to the body and request a free conference. And that free conference committee would be a different committee. It would be made up of different members. These members would be ineligible to serve. But that free conference would be able to rewrite the bill and do amendments. It is also possible that these members will come back to the legislature and ask the legislature to waive the rules. See, it is the rules, this is the uniform rules that are adopted by the legislature that require the members of the conference committee as ineligible to serve on a free conference committee. This is a check and balances to make sure that when these four members basically, when these four members are trying to cobble together, negotiate and cobble together an agreement that they will then present to the rest of the body for an up or down vote, that if they can't find the agreement, then somebody else comes in and does the amendments. Okay, so it's a check and balance here. But what I think is brewing here is that these members are going to come back to the body and ask them to waive that rule so that these members can then be responsible for amending the legislation. We'll see whether that happens or not. Maybe they can find agreement amongst the different versions of the bill and we won't have to go down that road. We shall see. Okay. Good evening, all. I get your messages. Representative Steve St. Clair. I believe this is the first time you might have visited or at least messaged. Thank you for joining us. Steve says, everyone knows what needs to happen. The Senate is just doing their own thing. That's the understatement of the day. Thank you for participating. We're going to get started, and I have teed up a portion of the morning meeting, and then we'll watch a portion of the afternoon meeting. And I think the most important thing that we can do that would help us understand what's going on is hearing from the project developer themselves and their response to the current HB 381. Glenfarne came in Saturday, and they spent a good portion of time going policy by policy, section by section through HB 381 and explaining what they feel is the good, the bad, what needs to change, their perspectives, and communicated that to the conference committee. Conference committee had questions, they back and forth. And that's the portion that you really need to understand. What is it that the project sponsor is saying? Because if you're listening to the press or you're listening to social media, you're listening to talking heads like myself in this regard, it doesn't matter what our opinion is, right? It doesn't matter what that senator sitting on the committee's opinion is. It's Glenfarne. It's the project sponsor, the truth that they are bringing to the public record that you should really care about, right? If the thing is being said, if a policy is being challenged or supported by Glenfarne, that's you don't need somebody else to tell you. You just take their word for it. And I've asked this question before. As you're watching this, and you don't get to sit in person. You don't get to have a conversation with the individuals, but you can look at the video, you can listen, you can watch body language, you can do your own assessment as to whether you trust the individual or not. You're not going to be 100% accurate, I'm sure. But the question becomes, in some respects, are they lying? Are they telling the truth, or are they lying? Very much, let me just back up. Some of what I hear from a few individuals is putting words into the mouth of the project sponsor and pushing their own agenda by giving half-truths, okay? And that's just saying it politely. If you want to provide good oversight, you need to see it for yourself and hear from the horse's mouth, from Glenn Farn, and you be the judge as to whether they're telling the whole truth or not. The best you can do, because you're not going to get on a ferry and you're not going to get on a plane and there's no road, the best you can do is watch the video. Maybe second best is to pick the individual who you trust there in the legislature, who may be having the behind the scenes conversations. That would be your representative or your senator, and ask them to give you an assessment. Okay? Because there are many different interests and people who are commenting and having their own opinion about whether this project can move forward or it can't move forward, or what needs to happen and what blah, 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 blah. Nobody outside of Glenn Farn, outside of the corporation that exists, that has said, hey, we're responsible for developing this project. Nobody outside of them really knows what is it's going to take to be successful in this project. Okay. Nobody really knows. AGDC knows or has some idea. Glenn Farn knows, has some idea. Those are the project developers. They're moving forward. The legislature can think they have an idea. They don't know. They haven't been involved in the discussions. They're not the project sponsors, and this is not the legislature's subject matter expertise. Like, they can tell you that it is, but this is the wrong place to be having control conversations over this project. The legislature has to figure out what its tax policy is, and that's what's being asked of them. There's no ask for state money to help fund the program or fund the pipeline. There's zero risk to the state right now with regard to state dollars being required to build this pipeline. All that's being asked is for the legislature to set a tax policy that enables the project to go forward per the project developer. And that is hundreds of millions of dollars to the state in tax revenue. Without the project and without the reform of the tax policy, you get a big old goose egg. You get nothing. So what we're going to listen to now is Glenn Farn's response to the legislature's latest versions of their tax bill, the way the legislature, both bodies, thinks that they need to have it. Kind of a challenge for Glenn Farn and this conference committee to keep things straight. If they're talking about a provision, is it in the House version or is it the Senate version? And you'll hear them kind of dialogue back and forth to make sure they keep it straight. Because at the end of this process, they're going to need to have that dialogue or that understanding of which version they're bringing forward. Now, a committee substitute is normally you adopt a committee substitute in lieu of adopting or going through an amendment process. The majority of the committee decides, instead of adopting a dozen amendments, we'll just take the amendments that we want and draft them into this committee substitute, and we'll bring the committee substitute forward. Okay. So this is going to be crucial if you don't want to have things challenged in court as legitimate or illegitimate changes, right? Per our own rules, the committee substitute can only have provisions in it from the House or the Senate version. If there's an addition to the committee substitute that wasn't in either of those two bills, then it's probably not in order and could get challenged in court as being illegitimate. Unless there's a waiving of the rules that says you can amend in a conference committee, they had better not be attempting to do that. Now, maybe there is an amendment that has to happen, but procedurally, you don't want someone to throw a lawsuit up afterwards that says, hey, they amended this and they didn't have the authority to amend it. And the courts are like, yeah, you got to follow your own rules. And then it sets us back weeks, if not months, to get the legislature back in session and to fix it. Okay. So again, it's the legislature. They can create the laws and they can waive the laws. They can create the rules and they can waive the rules. Let's just make sure that they do it in the right sequence and the outcome is something that we approve of. Okay, let's get going. Frank, you're on HB 93. We're not here to talk about HB 93. You have a question about HB 93. Okay. HB 93 is a bill to stop residents from gaming the system. Rep. Himshoot is gaming the legislative process and has not sent the bill, which has passed both houses in a conference committee, to the governor to sign or get vetoed. Bill, yeah, of course, it passed both houses. It must be submitted to the governor before a new legislative session starts. As I understand it, it dies if not sent to the governor before the new session starts. I don't know that to be true. I don't think that it dies. I think that it might be able to exist in limbo, but it could be sent to the governor at any time. The special session that we are in right now has nothing to do with moving that bill to the governor's desk. It can move. They could gavel out tomorrow and it could still move to the governor's desk. When I brought up earlier, several meetings ago, discussion regarding the special session, what I meant to convey is that you already have a special session in going on right now, right? You have members of the legislature who are already in Juneau, and if there's a floor session, all of them should be there. Okay, not all of them are there for this conference committee. They're not going to sit around and waste their time. So they will come back in. What I was saying about HB 93 is if they don't send it to the governor while there's a special session called and the governor vetoes it, then while the special session's in, they could address an override because everybody's there. They just call themselves into session for the purpose of doing an override and they can hold the vote. If they wait and send that bill to the governor after this current special session is over, it means everybody's gone home. Then they have to get everybody back to Juneau, and that could be difficult. So that's all I was saying to tie HB 93 and the special session. They don't actually have anything to do with each other. The bill can get sent to the governor as soon as Representative Himshoot gives the green light to send it to the governor, my understanding. In past legislatures, I don't think the actual bill sponsor is the one that made that decision. It was the presiding officers that made the decision as to whether it gets sent or not. So I don't know what the arrangement is within the majority there in the House. I don't know. It could work both ways, whether the administration, the leadership of the body, meaning the Speaker's office, the majority leader's office, they get to decide when the bill is transmitted to the governor. If they defer to the bill sponsor and ask when they want to see it transmitted, then they can, that's an arrangement that they can be made. So anyway, that's what I know about HB 93. It doesn't require a special session to get sent to the governor. And it doesn't die if the special session ends without it going to the governor. Okay. Why does Senator Stedman, ask so many questions that are not even on the topic of the tax? Rick, because Senator Stedman believes he is doing his due diligence as the manager of the state. He believes that it's his responsibility to make sure that it's a good project. And he doesn't think that it is in some cases. So he's asking questions. He doesn't agree. That's why. It isn't Glen Farn, the project, does not need the blessing of the state legislature. it needs tax reform. It's come and said, hey, look, we need to reform this tax policy because it wasn't established with this pipeline in mind, and it makes the project uneconomical. We can't find investors with this tax policy, so we need a different tax policy. That's really all that the legislature needs to focus on right now. That's it. It's a private project. It's going to succeed or fail because the private sponsor, the corporation that's building it, is going to succeed or fail. The quicker we find out whether they're going to fail or not, the better off we would be. Okay. Okay, another question from Frank. Yes, I've read the Constitution. After listening to Senator Wilkowski, it's clear that Article 8, Section 2 states that all natural resources belonging to the state government and local government, including land and waters, for the maximum benefit of its government. No, that's not what this Constitution says. It's Constitution's written by the people, and it's maximum benefit of the people, not the government. HB 93 has to be sent to the governor before a new administration starts. Yes, Frank, that is a definite yes. Yeah, if HB 93 is not sent to the governor before the governor leaves office, then the next governor is not obligated to sign it. Yeah, /S. That way I know you're being sarcastic. Ask a question, get an answer. I'm in direct mode right now. Mr. Serious, you ask a question, I'm going to try to answer it. All right. Okay, let's get to the conference committee here.
Presentation pulled up on screen for those that are following on the big screen here. Mr. Prestige, please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Sharkey. Adam Prestige from Glen Farm for the record. In this presentation, I want to just give a bit of an overview of where we're going here. We'll talk about some of the project perspectives on the Senate, on the version of the bill that came out of Senate Finance, some project perspectives on the version of the bill that came out of the Senate floor, and a bit of a detailed discussion of one of the amendments in particular related to project labor agreements. And so we'll step through each of those. First, as we get into talking about the versions themselves, want to highlight our appreciation, of course, for the tremendous amount of effort that has gone into this bill, an incredible amount of thought that's gone into it by the multiple committees, Senate Finance Committee in particular, which is the version we're speaking about now, and just recognize how seriously everyone is taking this, and we appreciate that very much. So first, we'll talk through the provisions of the Senate Finance bill and just give some reactions to it. Matt and I will be kind of trading off the microphone as some of the provisions relate specifically to AGDC, and some of them relate more broadly to the project. And so first will be Matt talking about some of the AGDC provisions.
All right, this is Matt Kissinger for the record on slide 3. So definitely there appears to be an evolution happening with AGDC's powers as we go from the part of the project where we're trying to bring in this developer, and then going forward as we work with this developer. And so I think it's logical that some of the powers would change. There's a new requirement that we get that we notify legislature of any transfer of ownership, or if we're going to dispose of any assets, similar to how we did the 8-star transaction with Glen Farm. With this law in the book, we would be required to notify legislature and provide 90 days for them to disapprove. Again, we talked about that yesterday a bit, but it's 90 days, not 90 legislative days. And so it does allow us to operate somewhat within the commercial timelines. There's also a new Alaska LNG project bond fund. It's really As they retire a couple of the funds that we had used previously, this would be a new fund in place for revenues to go into, and then directly pay the revenue bondholders. And later, when we talk about things that still need to be addressed, we'll talk about the other aspect of that, which is our ability to service those bonds.
This is Adam Prestidge. Note, as you can see on the slide, we consider that this additional provision protects the states, provides additional protection for the state without really imposing any burden or issue for the project. So that's our positive commentary on that one.
Going to go out of their way to show some positive, show some love for the work that the legislature has done, just so it's not all negative. And I was just thinking about this as I listened to this for the second time. If there is a requirement for a 90-day pause on any decision, waiting for the legislature to be able to overturn it, or to basically veto whatever their what they decided. I'm unsure whether that means that the legislature has to come back into a special session in order to do that, to have a vote, or whether the Legislative Budget and Audit Committee can take the vote, because the Legislative Budget and Audit Committee acts kind of on behalf of the legislature during the interim. And so that committee, that's made up of both House members and Senate members, might be the approval authority or the rejecting authority, if you will, given the statute. I don't know what the statute actually says, whether that's requires a vote of the full body, or whether the Legislative Budget and Audit Committee is the approving authority. It would be interesting to know. I don't, right off the top of my head, no.
Mr. Chairman, can I skip one?
Yes. Speaker Edgman.
Yeah, I had to think about that a little bit, because your comment, Mr. Prestidge, was it protects the state. I'm sitting here thinking, again, as someone who hasn't served on a committee before, AGDC is in a minority ownership position of 8-Star Gold. I know there's a definitive agreement out there. There's also Alaska Advantage principles that aren't codified in this bill, as I understand it. And given the fact that AGDC is the minority voice at the table with 8-Star Gold, and we've got these sub companies, I think that comment about protecting the state's interest deserves at least some amplification, and maybe throughout this conversation as we go forward, because that's something that, I think is very keen to all of us, probably including yourself as a developer, because you want stability, you want certainty throughout the life cycle of this entire project. So I just put that out there, Mr. Chairman, maybe now is a little bit early to bring that into full conversation, but I'd like to talk more about it as we go along.
Thank you for getting that on the table, Speaker Edgman. Yeah, please continue, or if you'd like to respond.
In response,
by all
yes,
means.
thank you. Speaker Edgman, through the chair. Thank you for highlighting that. We will continue throughout this presentation to identify the provisions that we think add additional protections to the state. It is very important for us as a developer. We want there to be a feeling of fairness and accommodation and protection for the state and risk management for the state. The more that we can build that into the law in a way that also facilitates the project going forward is just honestly good for everyone. And so we'll continue to highlight that as we go through.
Speaker Edgman.
And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that comment, and I'll continue with questions as we go along.
Okay. Very good. Please continue, Mr. Prestidge.
Okay. Glad we got that out of the way.
To Mr. Kissinger.
Yep, this is Matt Kissinger for the record. Another change is the types of subsidiaries that AGDC has. So subsidiaries that we have control of. In the past, we created 8-Star as a subsidiary. It was a project company. Obviously, we divested of a portion of that, 75% to Glenfarne. Going forward, the likely subsidiaries for AGDC will be more as vehicles for co-investment in the project. For example, if municipalities or if other state agencies wanted to invest in part of the 5 to 25% option that AGDC has carved out, they would do so through a subsidiary that we create to hold the benefits of that investment in. And so it is more appropriate that there is limitations on what we can do as far as transfers to those subsidiaries. This is all wrapped up in the new language around the Alaska LNG Project Bond Fund, ensuring that we have this fund available to pay bonds. I think we also need an ability to service our co-investors. But this is all in the state's best interest. So we feel that this provision is great.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. He mentioned 8-Star Alaska, and in the legislation for the committee and those watching, you would agree that 8-Star is the primary owner, referred to as a primary owner in the legislation, and the project developer is Glenfarne.
Senator Hoffman, through the chair, that's a very good clarification, and that's correct, that 8-Star is the property owner and the project developer is Glenfarne. Adam, if you want to confirm that as well.
Senator Hoffman, agree with that summary, with that
Thank you.
definition.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman. Please continue.
This is Adam Prestidge, again, for the record. As Matt said, we also think that addition here on the screen is protective of the state's interest. My personal view is that a lot of the legislation that formed AGDC was really focused on this pre-operational phase. And some of what the committee added was statutes that go more into how is AGDC managed when this project is operating and producing revenues. And this puts guidelines around how those operational revenues will be handled.
Frank's got a really good question and a good point. How can boroughs and municipalities invest in a project? Isn't that gambling with property taxpayers' money? Specifically, if it's coming from property tax, if it's sales tax, anyway, just taxpayer money, right? Frank, I think that is a legitimate question here from somebody who's a limited government person. The government should only be taxing that which is required to do the minimum amount necessary for execution of the things that the people want the government to do. If it's taxing to an extent that it has money to invest, then that's money that came from you, from the taxpayer, not for the purpose of paying for government, but so that government can grow, so that government can invest it in something, some project that then kicks off more revenue. And you might think, oh, well, great. If it has more revenue off of an investment, then does that mean the taxpayer has less taxes? But that's not how it works. That's not how it works. We're figuring that out as permanent fund recipients, permanent fund dividend recipients. The government continues to take more and more of the permanent fund dividend, right? That's revenue being generated off an investment to pay for government. And when that's gone, they will still have to fund it somehow for that's when you end up with a new tax, right? Because so it's government's always going to consume all of the revenue that's available to it. It will eventually consume all the, you're always fighting that battle of taxation because government's always reaching out its hand to grab. That's just the nature of government. Okay. So right now it's grabbing the permanent fund dividend. It wants to grab the permanent fund. Here it's trying to grab money from a project that hasn't been built yet. Your local governments, if they take excess funds that they have, instead of returning them to taxpayers and invest it in a project, my argument is that's not the appropriate use of taxpayer money, right? It's a private project. Let the private entity invest and find the investors. Don't risk public funds on this private endeavor, right? That's where I'm coming from. Now, if the project is opening itself up to other entities, which is what you heard, that potentially can be other funds that already exist. Okay. So it doesn't necessarily have to be governments. It can be boards that choose to spend some of their money on this project, invest in the project. So what would I be thinking when I say that? I think the mental health trust. I think the power cost equalization fund. I think the permanent fund. I think the higher education fund. You've got a bunch of different funds that somebody has management, administration responsibility, likely, in the, likely it's a permanent fund board, permanent fund corporation is investing many of that. Might be the Department of Revenue is investing it. Those are two entities that invest majority of our funds. Okay. So those entities may decide to put some of their capital that they're managing in play with this pipeline project. Okay. That is another entity that could choose to, has money at its disposal that could choose to invest in the projects. I don't know. We haven't gotten that far yet. we haven't got past the hurdle that says we have a viable project from a tax perspective. We still don't have a viable project from a tax perspective. Good question, Frank. Yeah. Overtaxing for savings. If your government is saving money, that means it's overtaxing. That's literally what it says. Good question, Dixie. I have not heard a provision yet in law, and I don't know whether they would need to. I do know. So the question is, can the private sector invest? Real people invest in this. When Glenfarne came on board and they had public meetings, they expressed interest in allowing everyday Alaskans to be able to invest in the project. I haven't heard through the legislative committee meetings whether that policy is being implemented. And you can see with all of the complexity already, with all of the different fingers in the legislature pull in different directions, that if Glenfarne was to step up and if they need statutory authority to do that, then it would just be one more hurdle, one more thing one more wrench to throw in there and get people upset about or complain about or stop things. So you can see how maybe they don't want to bring that up. They just minimize the amount of things that we have to focus on so that we can get this agreement done, right? I don't know whether they need statutory authority to allow investors to invest in their company or whether that is just something that they can choose to do as a private company. I don't know. It's a good question. We'll see if we can't find an answer. Making a note here so I don't forget. Okay. All right. Public funds. Yeah, okay. All right, let's we got some time here. Let's get going.
This is Matt Kissinger for the record, going to slide 5. More provisions regarding AGDC with respect to really our assets going forward that protect the state's interest. Again, our assets going forward primarily will be related to the revenues coming back to us as we structure the AGDC to be a true participant in the project and perhaps to even exercise our 5 to 25% option. We create this bond fund. This requires us, or the board of AGDC, to review that bond fund and provide legislature with a complete accounting of the assets of that fund and of the corporation with an eye of ensuring that the fund does not accumulate more revenues and more funding or more funds within that fund than are necessary.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Speaker Edgman.
will the Department of Revenue be managing that fund?
Speaker Edgman, through the chair, our existing statutes already allow that the Department of Revenue can provide us with advice on managing that fund. And so the way the fund mechanically within this legislation, what is really happening is the existing Alaska LNG fund is being renamed into the bond fund. And so those existing statutes, as I read them, would still be in place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Please continue.
So if the corporation, AGDC, is raising funds by selling bonds, that may be one way that Alaskans can participate. I don't know for a fact, but that might be a way to do it. You would just be buying bonds. Your return on investment is not necessarily as good as it would be in some other investment, but it might be a near sure thing because you've got the backing of this giant project. I don't know whether that's the extent of how you would be able to participate as a private citizen or not. I don't know the specifics on that. And like Rick said, we may not even get to that point with this committee. We'll see whether they can pull a rabbit out of a hat and come up with something that the project sponsor, the project developer, can thinks they can move forward with.
Matt Kissinger, still for the record. On slide 6, this is just saying that, there is also the statute that creates the fund as I just described it.
Please continue. Slide 7.
This is Adam Prestige. The addition in Senate Finance version, the addition of AS 3705-615 creates a Alaska Affordable Heating Fuel Fund. This is a new fund in the state treasury that would help Alaskans with the affordability of heating fuel. From the project perspective, we're very happy to see this added to the legislation. As we've talked about many times, we want this project to be to the benefit of Alaskans. We're trying to do everything that we can to deliver low-cost, reliable energy to Alaskans. One of the limitations that we have as a project developer is that not all Alaskans have access or are within range of the gas pipeline itself. And so there's just been a physical limitation on how much this project can help from an energy affordability perspective to particularly rural Alaskans. And so this is a very thoughtful addition to make sure that the benefit of having gas transported on the pipeline isn't limited to only those who are in proximity to the pipeline corridor itself, but to make sure that some of those benefits do go to rural Alaska in particular to make heating fuel more affordable. And so, very good for Alaskans, good for the project, and we're happy to see this in the legislation.
Why it's good for the project is it increases the number of people who would have buy-in and would benefit from the project. So it's not just those on the rail belt that would see gas to be able to tap into the gas being supplied. It's not just the tax revenue that's coming to the government, but now you've got another subset of people in Alaska, basically Western Alaska, rural Alaska, that is never going to have a pipeline, a gas, access to the gas. But now they want to see the pipeline go forward because now there's a pool of money that they're going to benefit from, right? This is how you make the deals in the legislature is to how to get people to vote for things. This is how it's done. Is it costing more for the project? No. The 20% of royalties would just be says funded with 20% of royalties received from gas transport on the project. It just means that you're earmarking 20% of the royalties to Western Alaska, as opposed to it benefiting, something else, whatever you would want to use it for. It doesn't add overall cost to the project, but it adds supporters of the project.
Not seeing any questions. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. The next slide here, again, goes to the price cap. We'll talk a little bit about the nuances of how inflation is handled. My sense is that there's general alignment on it, but we just need to get the quite frankly, kind of all of the pieces to fit together. So we'll talk about that later in this presentation. Obviously, having a price cap creates certainty for Alaskan consumers. The bill also includes a cost overrun prohibition to ensure that utility payers aren't on the hook to pay the cost of cost overruns.
Obviously, the devil's in the details on any sort of price cap. Are there exclusions or reasons why it wouldn't apply? I haven't read the bill, so, and the bill's not signed yet, so it's subject to change. But just because you have a price cap and you can say, look, we have a price cap, does it really cap? Like, y'all know we've got 2 spending caps in our legislature, right? In our government. Got one that's in the Constitution and one that's a statutory. And the Constitution doesn't apply because we don't even spend nearly as much as high as the cap is. And the other statutory one we bump up against from time to time and we ignore it. So I'm not saying that that Glenfarne or the project would be able to ignore the law, but if it's drafted in such a way that the cap has exclusions, then does it really cap it, or are there ways around it? Right. So devil's in the details.
Please continue.
Next, the Senate Finance Bill maintains an abatement period for a period of 5 years. The sooner of 5 years after commencement of commercial operations of the pipeline, or exceeding 500 million cubic feet a day of throughput on the pipeline. Effectively, that is no tax on there's no property tax on the pipeline while it is serving only Alaskans. So that's a benefit to Alaskans in the sense that cost can't get passed on. The abatement period starts after the Revenue Commission determines that the project has qualified and is eligible and has as you would, I guess I'd describe it as an outside date of 5 years to ensure that this abatement doesn't become a permanent abatement of tax if for some reason phase 2 of the LNG project, the LNG export facility, were delayed.
Senator Hoffman?
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
thank you. Please continue.
Thank you, Chair. Section 43.59.030.
Steve's nailed it. Representative St. Clair. If you create a fund in statute, which is what we're talking about, right? The wheels should already be going in your head because you watch this show. You're aware of what that means, right? If you create a fund in statute, not in the Constitution, that means it's subject to appropriation. So you can say 20% of the money is going to be used for this energy program. You can say that. You can say it in statute, and you can write it, in blood in the law. But it's still subject to appropriation. It's still subject to the legislature doing whatever the legislature wants to do every year. Okay? Because it's not in the Constitution. So you create the fund, you create an expectation in Western Alaska or in rural Alaska that a certain amount of money is going to come every year, but it's subject to appropriation. So yes, it gives them a warm fuzzy.
was discussed in the Department of Revenue's discussion of the updated numbers for the alternative volumetric tax. Generally, what's been proposed, we think is workable for the project. We note that the change to the alternative volumetric tax does not change the actual allocation to communities. And in fact, when the AVT increases after year 11 and after 2060, 100% of those increases go to the state, but to be used for community assistance. And so, again, a thoughtful way to make sure that this project is benefiting communities across the state.
Sure.
Senator Stedman.
I think after January 1st, 100% goes to the general fund, not community assistance. Is that right?
That's my understanding, Senator Stedman. Might have a small error there.
Large error.
We got to back that up. Do you guys catch
Noting
what's
that for the
happening here?
record, Senator Stedman.
To the state, but to be used for
I think they're talking about this number right here. If you can see my cursor, after January 1, 2060, 100% goes to general fund as opposed to state community assistance. Okay. So what Senator Stedman is bringing up, and I don't know whether they're joking. It's hard to tell. It appeared that that Senator Stedman was not joking. That Senator Stedman is under the opinion that this, after January 1, 2060, all of the money doesn't go to state community assistance anymore. It goes to the general fund. Ha ha ha, yeah. Because they want the money. Community assistance means that it's already earmarked. It's designated funds. And this is... So, we come back to this again. The Constitution of the state of Alaska says when the legislature gets together to write budgets every single year, there's a prohibition. It is constitutionally prohibited from having dedicated funds, meaning you cannot by law say this certain revenue in these certain quantities is dedicated to this certain program or project. Okay, funds this part of government. You can't do that. Okay, so what they're talking about in this bill is a law that says 100% of this revenue coming from the collection and allocation of AVT is going to go to community assistance. Community assistance is just a program. It's just a policy. Community assistance is we're handing it back out to the people. Not to you and I, to our local governments. Okay, it's not going to be spent by the state budget in the sense that state programs or state departments get that money. Okay, it goes out in the form of community assistance. However the statute breaks that down. Okay, that can only be a designated fund. It can't be a dedicated fund, which means it is always subject to appropriation. You would have to put it in the Constitution to make it guaranteed so that the legislature couldn't mess with it. Okay. So you're literally putting something in the law just to find agreement on this project, right? That can be changed any year through the appropriations process. Any year. They just, through the budget cycle, they just line item on a budget that says state community assistance for the AVT goes to education, not to community assistance. Done. 21 and 11 and a governor, done. This is exactly what the framers were worried about. Framers of our state constitution were worried about. Is that every single time that there's a tax money or there's revenue coming in, that the legislature is going to squirrel it away to something and you never consider it, right? We even heard at one of the meetings that we watched, maybe they'll talk about it here, I'm not sure. I don't think so, but we heard Edgman bring it up, or at least I did. He's like, he was alluding to the fact that this is designated funds, right? It's designated funds, and that means that it just happens every year. It's just automatic. Okay. Listen to what that's meaning. It's meaning what he's saying is the legislature is not going to consider it. They're not going to think about it. It's just designated funds. And so it just happens. That's what the constitutional provision was there for, to prevent that from happening. So all they have done is change the word from dedicated to designated and continued the policy. That's all they did. It's not a dedicated fund, because we can't do that. It's a designated fund. Because the Constitution doesn't say anything about designated funds. It doesn't prohibit you from designating it. Okay. Well, then that means the legislature gets to choose every year as to whether that money being spent for community assistance is still the right thing. Okay. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because Senator Stedman jumps in, opines and jumps in and says, well, wait a second. I think that's a mistake. I think after in 2060, that money is supposed to go to the general fund. Well, why does it matter? He knows very well that the legislature can just choose to spend designated funds any way they want, right? There's a constituency involved, right? There's an expectation that the legislature has built into this thing, this thing they're creating right now. There's an expectation that it goes to the community assistance. They're creating the record right now through the committee process. In 2060, when somebody says, oh, the state community assistance is now going to go to the general fund instead, or this money is going to go to the general fund instead of, they'll point back to this meeting and they will say, well, look, the intention of the people, the members of the committee, was to make sure that we had state community assistance through 2060, after 2060. Okay. Oh no, but that was, they remarked that it was an error on the slide and they meant it for the general fund or whatever, right? So the point that I'm getting at is Stedman knows very well that you're creating a pool of money and a mechanism, a pathway for creating this constituency, this expectation that this spending continues, okay? That's why you have a constitutional provision with regard to the permanent fund. Right? It's in the Constitution. 25% of royalties get invested into the permanent fund on behalf of Alaskans. Okay, it's required. The state government, the legislature cannot take that 25% and do something different with it. It's required. Okay, they receive the money. It's required to go into the permanent fund. Here, you receive the money and you're going to put it in community assistance and call it designated. Senator Stedman knows full well that it's designated. He knows full well that you're creating a constituency. And what he's saying is, well, we probably ought to say that it goes to the general fund because at that point in time, we're probably going to want to spend it. Community assistance, they've already got their share. The government should get their share now. We the state budgeters, right? Because he's co-chair of finance. He'll never be around in 2060. New co-chair of finance is going to want that money for the general fund, right? And that's why he's suggesting that the community assistance thing needs to be changed. That's what it needs to say in the law. So we'll see if they come out with a CS and they try to make that change. If it's not in the House version and it's not in the Senate version, it's not allowed unless the rules have been waived and they're able to amend this bill. Okay. There's some context for you. Okay.
For community assistance. And so, again, a thoughtful way to make sure that this project is benefiting communities across the state.
Sure.
Senator Stedman.
I think after January 1st, 100% goes to the general fund, not community assistance. Is that right?
That's my understanding, Senator Stedman. Might have a small error there.
Large error.
Large error.
An error. All right, very good. Thank you for noting that for the record, Senator Stedman. With that, please continue.
Sure. The addition of some of the definitions in AS 43.59.100 are important because ultimately what will happen to this bill is that it will be put in the hands of highly sophisticated investors and lenders who will read it and trying to determine if it is drafted in a way that is clear enough and certain enough to warrant putting billions of dollars of their money to work. It will be read from a risk perspective to understand, is this a reliable piece of legislation? Is the lenders and investors, is our money going to be, protected or have a reliable return based on the legal framework that we're investing into? And so that some of the definitions that the Senate Finance Committee added in are helpful just to provide clarification ultimately that will be to the benefit of the project and make financing more feasible.
The fact that the investors should be fully aware that they're dealing with the Alaska legislature might be the biggest hurdle yet, is that they can see this. I mean, you don't have to look back too many years to know that there were tax credits that were given that companies earned, and the state legislature said, yeah, we're not going to pay it. I mean, it's only a handful of years ago. Like Mr. Prestige is pointing out that it matters to investors whether they can trust the jurisdiction, the state, the government, whether it's, I mean, we're talking institutional, we're talking big investors, right? When I say state, I mean the state of Alaska, but I also mean the state being the government entity, whether it's the US government or whether it's the government of Zimbabwe. Can we trust the state, the government? Can they trust the Alaska state government? Like, our legislature right now is answering that question for investors. Can we trust these people? It's probably the single most important question that comes out of this process.
Thank you. Please continue to slide 12.
The Senate Finance version included a slight update to the Municipal Impact Fund. I'll talk about that a bit more because I'm following the sequential order of the statutes. Again, this is something that has a foundation in our earliest discussions with the mayors of the various boroughs. Obviously, this includes also the municipality of Anchorage, and so we, as the project developer, have been very supportive of this concept from the beginning. So happy to see it included.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Speaker Edgman.
So this fund can be capitalized up to 80 million, but this is a one-time capitalization. Is that right? Over the between now and 2062?
Representative Benjamin, through the chair, it's a two-time capitalization. The first time is 40 million at FID of the pipeline, and the second is an additional 40 million at FID of the export facility. That's got a way of essentially balancing out how the funds will be used. It ensures that a municipal impact fund isn't fully exhausted just by phase one before phase two even comes online, and it basically preserves community impact compensation for phase two, which will have the largest impacts in the Kenai Peninsula Borough while we're doing a major construction project there.
And for the record, that was Mr. Prestige. Follow-up, Speaker Edgman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this, I'm just trying to mechanically, come to grips with how this works. So on phase one and phase two, there will be AVT revenue, presumably and hopefully quickly into phase two of the project in order to make all this work, of course. So the affected boroughs will be getting revenue from their AVT component, but this impact fund will be there for verified actual and reasonably expected costs that are above and beyond what the borough, pick a Denali Borough, Fairbanks, North Slope, Kenai, whoever else is impacted, would be impacted. And I'm trying to get to how a little bit more how this works, but also I'm going to squeeze in, where does Anchorage fit into this picture?
Sure. Speaker Edgman, through the chair. The Municipal Impact Fund is unique because it applies and benefits the municipalities sooner than any other benefit would come. And so under AGDC's formation statutes, there's no tax paid, and so no tax revenues that come from the project during its construction period. So this takes essentially the very beginning of construction of the project, FID, and it makes capital available to municipalities while construction is starting, years before any tax revenue would otherwise be generated through the AVT.
And just as one last follow-up,
Please, Speaker Edgman.
Mr. Chairman. So the decision makers of how all this is executed will be the Department of Commerce and Economic Development?
Mr. Preston.
Speaker Edgman, that's correct. And the legislation now includes that the Department of Commerce, Community and Economic Development will use the funds for verified actual and reasonably expected impacts to ensure that they're used responsibly to offset real impacts on communities resulting from construction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Please continue.
This is Matt Kissinger for the record. Just as part of cleanup, it repeals what would be now outdated, and these funds have no money in them currently. So the in-state natural gas pipeline fund and the AKLNG project fund, which, as I said, really morphs into the bond fund.
Okay.
I think it's probably pertinent to bring this up at this point. The whole $80 million, the two tranches, 40 million at phase one FID and 40 million at phase two, that's in lieu of taxes up front. That's to cover the costs of impacts of the pipeline being built and the phase two construction being built, right? My understanding is all of that money is only there. Like it only needs to be spent. Its sole purpose is during construction. Once the municipalities, once the taxing jurisdictions start receiving revenue from the project, then whatever's left over in those funds probably goes back. I would expect it to go back to the to the company. Like the reason that it's there is for during construction. It's not a fund to continue funding government from years into the project, right? That's what your tax is for. That's what your volumetric tax is for. Or if you don't do the volumetric tax, that's what your property tax is for. So this portion is just to get us through construction, and I think that's worth clarifying. Otherwise, you've got $80 million there that municipalities are going to have an expectation on, that they can submit bills to even after construction's done.
I think that takes us to the next section of this presentation. Mr. Prestige, please continue.
Thank you, Chair Schwarge. Adam Prestige for the record. Next, we'll talk about some of the provisions in the Senate Finance version where we'd suggest some modifications, and we'll walk through those and what they are. The first that I'll go to is AS 14.17.410B. This was a change that changed the municipal required local contribution for school funding. The impact on the project direct economics is non-existent. However, we do want to go on the record and say that we want to see municipalities not put in a worse position by any of this legislation. The legislation, again, came from a very collaborative working group with the borough mayors. My understanding is that this provision in particular has a negative impact on one particular municipality, and so we urge that to be considered very carefully. We want to see municipalities not put in any worse position by the legislation.
Mr. Prestidge, did this change occur in the House, in Senate Finance, or on the floor? Can you remind me?
Chair Schweigert, my understanding is that this one occurred in the Senate Finance version.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Speaker Edgman, and then I've got Senator Stedman.
So I've read that in order to during the development stage, there'll be something like 12,000 jobs attached to this project. And then the ensuing years, it'll be 6,000 or so people involved with sort of maintaining, doing the additional work throughout the life cycle of this project. So is that what this fund sort of contemplates? Is the additional pressure that this is going to place on schools, or is this just something that's put into place for other reasons?
Speaker Edgman, through the chair. So just to clarify, when we talk about jobs created, it's approximately 7,000 for the construction of the pipeline, an additional 5,000 for the construction of the LNG facility. When it goes into full operations, you're looking at a much lower number, around 1,000 permanent, 1,500 permanent operational jobs. To my knowledge, the labor headcount is not directly tied to this provision. So that's my understanding.
Okay, Senator Stedman.
Could I have you explain this a little more? It was too high a level. So can you get down into more detail of what you're talking about on this, please?
Mr. Prestidge or Mr. Kissinger?
This is Matt Kissinger for the record. Senator Stedman through the chair. So my understanding is as this bill came out of the House, and this doesn't have a direct impact on the project, I would say. This is more about how the state, allocates the funds. But again, we don't want to see that the communities we're operating in be negatively impacted. But the way I understand it is you have a local contribution that you're required to make, and that is based on the amount of property tax that you're bringing in. And in the House bill, it removed this property from that calculation. And please, someone correct me if I'm wrong on this. And then as it went through the Senate, that was changed so that this would still be accounted for. And I think there's a limitation on how much it gets accounted for.
Who used to be in the Senate, who's now a mayor of a borough? Anybody? Anybody? Who used to be the Senate president and is now a borough mayor that might have something to do with this? Not because the borough mayor is requesting it. The change that happened in the in the Senate. This provision that they're talking about means that the Kenai Peninsula Borough would owe more money to education than was originally drafted or previously drafted. Okay. So it's a way, it's a way to get back. It's a way to get at Mayor Michicki. That's what I think is going on behind the scenes. Ben's opinion here. And I think that's partly why Senator Stedman was seething and did his professional best at controlling his emotions. But as Glenfarne is poking a little bit at the change that was made in the Senate, he's like, I need you to explain that some more. Because I think somebody pulled a fast one here and recognized, hey, Michicki's wanting he's wanting money to come to the boroughs. Oh, here, look what we can do. We can require him to spend more on education. Yeah, that's what I think is happening here. Politics. Yeah, it could be Putkatuk, but I don't think so. I think the impetus here, the emotional appeal, the draw is Senator Machicki, former Senator Machicki. I think that's where this is coming from.
But that's my understanding of it. And so it has the impact of.
And to answer your question, which one of you was it, Rick? It has nothing to do with the decision that the legislature has to make with regard to taxation, AVT or property tax. It has nothing to do with that. It's absolutely right.
As the bill came through the House or through the Senate, it increased the amount of local contribution that, for example, Kenai would be required to make.
Okay, and I think, Mr. Chairman, we have a more detailed presentation coming up.
Yes, we do, Senator Stebbin.
Okay.
Yeah, very good. Does that satisfy you for the moment?
Yeah, there's more.
Very good. Please continue.
More to that.
Thank you, Chair Sharkey. The next couple points Matt will speak to.
With respect to the AGDC confidentiality agreement language, I think what it's really gotten to is a point where all parties need to agree to waive the confidentiality. It doesn't have a huge, a lot of impact. We are trying to reach, a situation where we're still able to negotiate everything in confidence, and that's really required. And then once there is an opportunity available to the state as an investment option, then that information needs to be supplied to the state. And so we didn't feel that the way that confidentiality agreement language is framed, that it truly accomplishes that.
And this is Adam Prestidge. What I'll add is I expect this was unintentional, but the way that this provision 31.25.90 J6 was drafted would have the impact of making it impossible for the project to share information confidentially with investors. I can't imagine that was intentional because it would really make business communication impossible, and so not feasible for the project.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Understanding your position, instead of suggesting deletion, is there any suggested language change that could come forward? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hoffman, I believe that the answer is yes, and we'd be happy to propose that over in a very, very short period of time.
So that's what happens when you stick your finger in a senator's eye and they get their butt hurt. They don't want to have egg on their face. They don't want to be embarrassed in public because it was a really stupid thing to add into the Senate version. And they're like, can you, like, don't just give us a problem, give us a solution. Yeah, well, you guys put it in there. This is your amendment. You figure it out. Glenn Farnes, the professional, says, yeah, we'll be willing to work with you on finding some language where we can keep the provision in there, but it doesn't do what the negative things that it does so that you can save face. That's what it is. Somebody needs to save face.
For the record, that was Mr. Prestidge. Thank you. Representative Ruffridge.
Thank you, Chair Schrage. I just wanted to clarify that currently in the bill, Section 12 is adding a whole number of subsections. The only potential problematic area is just number 6. The rest of that section, there was not proposed changes from AGDC.
Representative Ruffridge, through the chair, that's correct. Later, we'll talk about AS 3125-270, which is the AGDC reporting and public dashboard, and these two are very closely related, and so there's some other issues that raise their head there.
Okay, thank you.
Now with Mr. Kissinger for the record. Senator Stebbin.
I think it might be helpful if they happen to know we're going through this, and if they happen to know the amendment number,
That's why you have staff,
Yeah,
Senator
Senator
Amendment.
Stedman
Senator
through the chair.
Stedman.
So right now, we are not going through the floor amendments. This instead is
Grief.
going through the language as it came out of the Senate Finance Committee.
I want you to do my work for me too.
And again, that was Mr. Kissinger, just again with two gentlemen presenting.
Entitled.
You can, when you start talking.
What
introduce
entitled
yourself.
fools.
Helps for the clerk's
Good
taking.
grief.
All right. I believe that takes us to the second bullet here on this slide. Or have we covered that already? We've covered it. Thank you. Please proceed.
That's as easy as saying, hey, Chief of Staff, I don't know what these guys are talking. Which amendments are these? How did we pass these? He's still on the last one. He's like, ow, my eye hurts because you just poked me in the eye. Which amendment was it that we passed that? He's still thinking about that. He should just turn to his staff member and say, hey, what amendment was that? Can you get me a list of amendments here? Like, there's a private company sitting there. It would be really nice if you'd tell us your provisions on which amendment that we passed are you talking about? Like, how is that value added? Why would I come as a private company and tell you which amendment you passed? Don't you already know that? I mean, I'm giving you the statute. Your amendment references the statute. You should already know that. Crazy.
This is Matt Kissinger for the record. With respect to AGDC accounting, this is what I've discussed a few times. Is right now it directs AGDC to deposit money generated by the subsidiary into different accounts in the general fund, and then it allows legislative approval or legislative appropriation back into, for example, the bond fund. What we're trying to achieve is the ability to issue revenue bonds. Of course, there's the notification, and so the legislature would be involved in any of the revenue bonds that we issued. But we'd like to be able to service those bonds in the future, or we'd like to be able to guarantee to the bondholders, the buyers of those bonds, that they will be serviced without that servicing needing to go through appropriation year after year. And the same goes through for co-investors. For example, if a municipality or a sister agency co-invested through one of these vehicles that we've discussed, we would want to be able to put the revenues to service their investment into that vehicle without appropriation. There are two models that I think have been looked at, and I don't think anyone has ever disagreed on what we're trying to achieve here. I just don't think that we've struck it correctly yet. ADA is one example. I think it's ADA under AS 4488060. ADA has their revolving fund. And so ADA are able to just bring in their revenues. They're able to use those revenues to service their bonds. And then the remaining portion after servicing bonds or co-investors, et cetera, then has to be remitted to the general fund. Another example is the Alaska International Airport System. And I think they tried to model this after that one, but I think they may have missed a key element of that one, which is when it was enacted, legislature enacted a continuing appropriation. So there wouldn't need to be future appropriations for the funds to service the bonds. So I think we need to pick one of these two models. I think our preference is the ADA model. But certainly we need to be able to provide certainty to co-investors or purchasers of bonds that those payments will not be obstructed by future appropriations.
I think there's very little chance that was drafted by mistake. The legislature is all about control. That everything that is being demonstrated in Senate resources, in House Finance and Senate Finance, in this conference committee is about control. It is about people who some of these senators are still frustrated and upset that they're having to deal with a private corporation. They wanted AGDC to find somebody to come in and build this pipeline. Get this. They wanted AGDC to find a developer to come in and build the pipeline with AGDC owning 100%. AGDC controlling it. But instead, what AGDC found was somebody to come in and build the pipeline, but they required 75% majority ownership. And the legislature's like, you did what? You gave away majority ownership of our pipeline? but it's our pipeline. We just wanted you to go find a developer to build it for us. And AGC is like, hey, you know what? We've been trying to do that for a decade. Nobody wanted to do it. We finally found somebody to do it, but they required ownership. And now the same legislators who created AGDC in the beginning are absolutely frustrated that they're having to deal with a private corporation. That's where all of these questions are coming from. Scrutiny, because they still think and see themselves as project owners and project as the controlling entity in this project. And they're not. They're no longer the controlling entity. Glenfarne is. The private company is. There's zero chance, in my humble opinion, zero chance that it was drafted in error. I think AGDC is being kind here and not wanting to poke them in the eye to say this must be an error, because we've got no way. The legislature literally wanted to have the say-so before AGDC paid off anybody, spent money. They wanted the Senate Finance to be able to say yes or no. They wanted it to be a part of the appropriations process so they could control it. Yes. Zero chance that was by accident.
Okay, please continue.
This is Adam Prestidge. One of the additions from the Senate Finance Committee is the publication of a project dashboard that will provide public updates about elements of the project. We're generally supportive of that concept and just have, I call them some minor suggested modifications to some of the information that would be very commercially sensitive. One is we'd suggest deleting the requirement to publish payroll updates. It just gets into, like I said, commercial sensitivities. We'd suggest deleting the regular updates on capital expenditures. Again, that gets very detailed into kind of the project development status and how capital is being deployed and when. And then there is a long list of all the different components that would require status updates. We'd suggest something a little bit more high level for public consumption on a public dashboard. On a similar perspective, there is a proposal in the dashboard to give an update on each offtake contract. Again, that gets into sensitive commercial negotiations, and we'd suggest that is an update on aggregate offtake marketing on kind of a project-wide basis rather than a per customer basis. We'd suggest like the following 2 points are reducing some of the details required in point E1 and E10. And then lastly, that point F at the end there, that language says that we can redact information from the dashboard if it's deemed too commercially sensitive, but that redaction ability is only limited to the dashboard. We'd like to see that redaction ability also apply to AGDC's semi-annual report. And so just in summary of this slide, we're supportive of the dashboard concept. We think it provides on a monthly basis information for the public. We just want to be thoughtful about not requiring the project to disclose too much commercially sensitive information.
Not seeing any questions, please continue.
Speaking of people that are not thinking about things in commercial terms.
there are a few different places where the legislation requires AGDC to provide notices to the legislature about regarded to changes of ownership. One of the concerns there is it does provide or it does require it requires AGDC to make notifications of information that might be confidential. The language requires actually that AGDC has to notify the legislature if there is even a planned or contemplated change of ownership. If there were a contemplated change of ownership, that would almost certainly be highly confidential and definitely not public in any way. And so we'd suggest deleting that in order to provide some certainty to investors and financiers that their ownership won't be required to be made public. As an alternative to deleting this provision, one thing that we could rely upon is the requirements that the project has to make federal disclosures regarding ownership. There is no doubt, make no mistake about it, this project has tremendous federal regulatory oversight. There are numerous federal permits. Each of them has a whole regime of reporting requirements and obligations and regulations. This project is heavily regulated by the federal government in addition to state regulations. Regardless of whether the project takes federal funding or not, that federal oversight stays in place. Some of that federal oversight does require the project to disclose, for example, to the Department of Energy, changes in ownership. And so one alternative here would be for the legislation to require that if the project makes ownership-related disclosure or filings with federal agencies, that those disclosures or filings are also provided to the state.
Okay. I'm follow up on conversation statements that I just made earlier, right? With regard to AGDC changing ownership, finding Glenfarne. This is the legislature's attempt to make sure that doesn't happen again. They're like, you're going to notify us if you even get a hint, right? If it becomes aware that an entity in a legal relationship, right, an entity status, plans to make or has made a significant ownership change. Okay, so where does this stop? If Glenfarne has a legal relationship with a company, they're partnering with, for example, somebody who's building pipe or laying pipe or servicing pipeline or whatever. They're one of their contractors. Okay. Contractor changes ownership. Anybody associated with a project changes ownership. Where does this end? Look, this is the legislature saying we want control. Private company, if there's anybody that changes ownership that's going to influence this, we want to know about it. For what purpose? You're a minority owner. There is a private company that's making the decisions now. They're going to build you a pipeline. They have federal reporting requirements. And the state comes and says, you know what? We got to know. We do not want AGDC to be giving away any more of our project. That's, in essence, what's being said. I cannot understate how much this issue is what I believe to be the foundation of the friction that's happening in the legislature right now. It surfaces and you get this flavor of elitism or socialism or government control. This is what it is. This is people who wanted to have a state-run pipeline, AGDC being a state corporation, a state-run pipeline with somebody that they contract with to build it. They've lost that, and they're They're throwing a fit, basically. We're going to get a pipeline out of it if they can just control themselves and all of the other stars align. Whereas if we continue down this path that we were on before with AGDC owning the whole thing and finding it, it would never happen. It would never happen. Nobody wants to come in and work for AGDC. AGDC is not going to manage a pipeline. Give me a break. The legislature is going to have too many strings attached to AGDC. The legislature can't manage a pipeline. That's why people don't come in, and private like investors are like, no, not even no, but heck no. We're not going to do that. It never happened. That's why it never happened. This is the undercurrent. This is the foundation for the conflict that's happening in the legislature over this project. Here, the project developers like, yeah, you got to get rid of this. This doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for the investors.
Senator Stedman.
So if I'm understanding correctly, if you have, I think the ownership may be 10% or something, 10% change or whatever it is at the federal level, and you can help me with that. And then, so then less than whatever the federal guidance number is, just hypothetically say it's 10%, then your position is we shouldn't concern ourselves with that, or and why wouldn't we want to know who is all the equity investors, who owns and what share of the liquefaction plant, the conditioning plant, and the pipe? Why wouldn't we want to know that?
Mr. Prestige.
Senator Stedman, through the chair.
Can you hear the entitlement here? This is a great answer.
It's a good question. Yes, the answer is 10%, the 10% ownership change. Again, there is part of this that is just creating some operational efficiencies for the project to not have, multiple layers of different reporting requirements. And our position would be that, if the federal government has set a standard for reporting ownership, it's a clean solution to duplicate that for the state. If the state were an equity investor, I think there would be additional rights to understanding the equity makeup of the project, and so that's something that would be discussed in that subsequent investment conversation.
Senator Stedman.
Where's my pause? Yes. So if the state is going to be, an equity partner, then understanding who you're in business with, partnership, is important. Then, yeah, we can share some information with you. But if you're not going to spend the money and be the equity investor, you're not entitled to the information. This is a business deal. This is private business deal. You're going to scare away all of the private business people if you keep this in. They're going to not want to participate.
I don't have to think about this a little bit because I think that I don't think we have a lot of ownership in our oil basin that's non-disclosed. So we'll have to, I guess, ask Revenue that question when we have the opportunity. I just kind of lean more to full disclosure than less disclosure within reason.
Senator Stedman, through the chair, fully take your point. And I think we'd be very willing to work with the committee to help identify what would be the right disclosure requirement within reason, as you say.
If I may, Matt Kissinger for the record, Senator Stedman through the chair, with respect to the upstream, I think there actually are instances where, with respect to new exploration leases, the lessee will be a vehicle that, in a sense, hides the true ownership behind those leases.
Poke, poke.
So I do think
Both
there's
eyes.
precedent for that in the upstream, to be honest.
You don't know what you're talking about, Senator.
But it sounds like we'd know the front company anyway.
Correct, which would be similar to H-Star in this case.
This has everything to do with control. It has nothing to do with taxation policy. Okay? Just remember this. It is the legislature trying to exert control over the project that is now a private project.
Likely a topic for further conversation. Please continue.
Thank you, Chair Sharkey. This is Adam Prestige. Next, on the inflation adjustment, the price cap, my general view is that between all the different committees and versions and amendments, I think there's a general concept of what works. But I'm not sure that there is any specific, any of the different versions have it fully comprehensively. And so I'm just going to describe my personal understanding of what I think everyone has agreed to. And by that, I mean the different committees and the different floor votes with one small modification. And so this is a summary of my personal understanding. So we've agreed that the project would have a $16 price cap on the cost of the price of gas. That $16 is subject to inflation. The inflation formula would be the formula set out in the contract between the project and the buyer that has been approved by the RCA, subject to a limit of 3% of escalation. And then the only distinction I have is that we think it would be more stable and reliable for investors if that were a 3% US CPI limit rather than, a US CPI adjustment rather than a Alaska CPI adjustment.
Not seeing any questions, please. Oh, Senator Stedman.
We have generally published inflation numbers coming out of Anchorage, right? The state. Can you give a little more detail why you want the national inflation rate that's published in the Wall Street Journal, or what do you want? What are you asking us to do?
Senator Stedman, truthfully, it comes down to a bit more familiarity for global financing markets who are more familiar with U.S. inflation, operating under U.S. inflation than Alaska inflation. So that's.
Senator Stedman, follow up.
So that would be the Department of Labor publications, Federal Department of Labor?
Yes, Senator Stedman.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Prestige. Additional questions on this slide?
It's just a metric.
Not seeing any. Please continue.
Thank you, Chair Schrage. This next slide, this is Adam Prestige, goes to the definition of taxable property. And what I would call this is a very important technical cleanup. There was a definition in the House bill of taxable property that made it very clear that exempt property is subject to the alternative volumetric tax and is very clear that it can't be subject to additional property tax. I believe that is absolutely the intent of everyone involved. We just think the language could be a little bit more clear, and this is a core issue, which is why we're highlighting it here. And we will follow up with the committee to provide specific suggested language on that clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Prestige. And just because you mentioned it, timing or expectation on when we would receive that?
We've got a team working around the clock to provide that, Representative Schrage. So I'd say the next day or so.
Okay. Thank you. Senator Stedman.
Just need a little clarification. So we got a 3% inflation cap suggestion. Inflation, say, was 5%, and then it drops back down, below that 3. Can you pick up that extra 2% you left on the table, and when inflation drops down, or do you lose it?
Mr. Prestige.
Senator Stedman, through the chair, Obviously, there's different ways you could do that under contract that in this specific instance haven't considered that. It would come down to what was agreed between the customer and the project. So I don't have an answer to that, Senator Stedman.
Okay.
Mr. Prestidge, do you recall, is there an averaging mechanism in there for CPI?
Chair Scharge, yes, there is a 5-year average look back.
Thank you. Additional questions? Senator Stedman.
And just to that point, we've faced that with other legislation. If that 5-year average is, say, 5% and the cap's at 3%, is that 2% lost forever? You take a real reduction, or can you pick it up as the economic swing in the opposite direction? It's just something that we need to clarify.
And Senator Stedman,
At least for the state side of the revenue, he's on his own, haggling with his own contracts, but for us, we don't want to lose it.
right.
Senator Stedman. Mr. Prestidge, do you have additional comments?
I would say, Senator Stedman, just the kind of commercial default would be that unless you had provisions saying that you could make that up later, it would be lost. And so if it were, negotiating with a customer contract subject to inflation that had a cap, unless it were agreed separately between the customer and the project, if you went above that cap, it would be disregarded forever unless you had agreed to bank it for the future.
Okay. Thank you. I've got Representative Ruffridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm confused.
It's actually a good sign if Senator Stedman, in my opinion, if Senator Stedman is that interested in making sure that the inflation language in implementing the AVT is maximizing what's coming to the state, that's actually a good sign, right? In my opinion, it could be an indicator. It's at least an indicator that he's supportive of passing some sort of bill. Could be an indicator. Could not be. I don't know. But if we want to get it right, then that means there's going to be a thing coming up. There's something that we want to agree to, right? Just a thought I had. Also means that if you're going to modify the current language and it's not right in either version of the bill, you're going to have to amend it somehow. And the conference committee is the wrong place unless the legislature is going to give this group of people, these 4 people, the ability to amend anything in the bill. That's what they would do by giving them free conference ability. Unless they're willing to do that, unless the body 21 and 11 are willing to do that, they can't amend the bill. If this CPI language needs to be amended or changed, any of these changes that Glenn Farn is suggesting it's problematic for this committee.
Used now by this conversation, because I assume with a 5-year look back, you would essentially be able to level out the peaks and the troughs. So to answer Senator Stedman's question, the answer is yes, you would potentially pick it up unless you were under that number for 5 years straight or over the number for 5 years straight. Is that a correct assessment?
Representative Ruffridge, through the chair, I think that I agree with that. The 5-year look back definitely creates a blending that makes this scenario less likely to occur.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Prestidge. I'm going to go back to Senator Stedman.
I don't agree with that at all. You run an inflation cycle, say the inflation cycle is running between 4% and 6% for a decade, and you're capped at 3%. You can lose your shorts. So if it's just something that affects the state, we need to make sure we can pick that back up on our revenue side. It's, they don't want to run inflation cycles. They want to control them, but inflation does get out of hand. And in the event the governor or the government ever wanted to run a long longer run inflation cycle to dilute the value of our debt, which is significant federally. I think we need to ensure that we are protected on that.
Thank you, Senator Stedman. Senator Hoffman.
We have brief ADs, Mr. Chairman.
Brief.
It's one thing for the invited testimony in Glenfarne and AGDC to poke the senator in the eye, but don't let a junior House member poke me in the eye. I'm not going to stand for that.
Please.
All right, let's. I think we're at the point where they take a rather significant break here. Let me figure out where we're coming back to here. Matter of fact, I think we're going to jump to the following day and wrap this up. Okay, this should be queued up, ready to go. Oop, not that one. There we go.
I call this meeting of the Conference Committee for House Bill 381 to order. The time is now 2:05 p.m. on Saturday, June 27th, 2026. Present today, we have Chair Hoffman, Senator Stedman, Senator Cronk, and in the House, Representative. Our presenters for AGDC and Glenfarne are...
Yep, we know. Whoops, sorry. There we go.
I am here on behalf of AGDC, purely on behalf of AGDC, not on behalf of 8-Star or the developer in any way. Much like when the senators and representatives meet with their caucus, we certainly do meet together and discuss things, and we attempt to be on the same page on everything that we can.
This is answering a question that Senator Hoffman asked at the end of the morning meeting that I just skipped over. Questioning Mr. Kissinger on what his role is, because he's a consultant brought on by AGDC to be their operations director. And Senator Hoffman was questioning whether he was there representing AGDC or is he representing 8-Star or what his relationship is, which is an interesting line of questioning in a tax conversation. It has nothing to do with it. Somebody's fishing for something.
We deliberate and we don't always agree, and we go back and forth on things, and I sometimes move him and he sometimes moves me. So when I am here, I am standing here on behalf of AGDC and the state.
Senator Hoffman.
With that in mind, the presentation, how should we take your role on the issues that are being brought forward to us under Glenfarne's title?
Senator Hoffman, through the chair, I would just hope that when I am speaking and testifying, that you take that as me testifying and speaking on behalf of AGDC and not on behalf of the developer.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other opening questions or comments? With that, please continue.
Thank you, Chair Schrage. This is Adam Prestidge. I'll continue the presentation where we were. We were talking through the Senate finance version of the bill.
There is some bad blood here. There is something going on behind the scenes here that we're not privy to, and that I'm not sure what's happening here. But going after Kissinger like that is problematic. Why ask the questions? Why question whose question is loyalty? Are you representing the state through AGDC, or are you representing the guy sitting next to you that's Glenfarne? Who are you loyal to? Basically, my read on the question.
A commentary on some of the provisions and some of what may or may not present challenges or issues for the project, or that the project will be neutral on. And so I'll continue on that. I've got a few more slides here to go on the Senate finance version specifically. Then I've got some slides on the Senate floor version, and then a bit more discussion beyond that, which I'll get to. So continuing with the Senate finance version, the Senate finance version sets out some criteria for eligibility for the tax adjustment. There are 3 of them. I'll take them each one slide at a time. The first is that we established the municipal impact fund. And so there was a bit of a discussion on that in our prior session here today. But to reiterate, it'd be $40 million that's funded within 60 days of FID on phase 1. And then an additional $40 million that's funded within 60 days of FID on phase 2.
Please continue.
I feel like I need to just point out too that this is very similar to what I suggested needed to happen at the very beginning here, where we're talking about local municipalities needed to have the ability to tax, right? They needed their property tax through the construction phase because they weren't going to get any kind of there's impacts to the local community, right? And I said at the time, I said, look, just create it in statute where you have a fund or an obligation of the developer to pay for a list of approved impacts that the municipality can just submit for. Okay, just agree to it in statute and create that program, and that's basically what they're doing, which is great because that's all that's needed. Just let the developer and the project local governments work those costs out, but put sideboards on it so that you don't run crazy, right? The one problem here is that it isn't just written in statute and managed between the two. You've got the Department of Commerce that is now, it appears, going to be the arbitrator or the bureaucracy involved or controlling the process. And that's probably not a good thing. Anyway, I just find that this is it's actually a good move in my opinion.
The second conditional requirement is that there is a PLA, a project labor agreement, entered into for construction of the gas pipeline. With your allowance, Chair Scharg, I'd like to defer the discussion of that until the end of my presentation. We'll talk about that in some detail.
As you wish.
We really need to get to that.
Then the last conditional requirement relates to, and I apologize, I want to make this totally clear, relates to the Fairbanks spur line and the project's commitment to incorporate the spur line. So there was a lot of discussion on that in Senate Finance from a number of different parties. The only commentary we have on that, this was discussed a bit in Senate Finance, is that as currently set up in the bill, the costs of the Fairbanks spur line are borne on a system-wide basis to all customers, including export customers. We think that having international export customers pay for the cost of the Fairbanks spur line is pretty far from the concept of the RCA testified and talked about the concept of the causer of the cost should be the payer of the cost. The idea of having international LNG buyers pay for the Fairbanks spur line stretches that principle pretty far. It also just adds competitive pressure by raising the cost of LNG exports from Alaska LNG. And so our proposal would be that the Fairbanks spur line costs are spread only to domestic Alaska customers.
Please continue.
Last, in terms of conditional effect, we think that it would provide certainty to all parties involved that if there were language clarifying that after the Department of Revenue Commissioner makes a determination of eligibility, that determination of eligibility can't be revoked. And so the language in the bill sets out the clear requirements to establish eligibility. The commissioner makes that determination, and it would give comfort and certainty to lenders and investors if that determination were irrevocable.
Please continue.
Okay, Chair Scharg, that takes me through all the commentary on the Senate Finance version. And so now I'll shift into talking about the amendments that were passed on the Senate floor. The first is Amendment 3. This goes back to the discussion around the project deadlines, 2028, 2032, 2037. Amendment 3 provided force majeure allowance, basically that if there's a date, a deadline for the project, it can be reasonably extended by the Department of Revenue Commissioner in the event of a force majeure. That's a helpful addition. It's good for the project. It could be a little bit broader because force majeure is really kind of acts of God outside of the control of the project. There can be other delays to a project like this that wouldn't necessarily be picked up within a force majeure definition, such as archaeological finds or shipping delays. And so we'd advocate that it would be beneficial to the project to look at broadening that definition a little bit. But regardless, the inclusion of a force majeure extension is beneficial to the project.
Please continue.
Amendment 5 added an expanded amendment relating to the definition of a project labor agreement. I'd like to discuss that momentarily.
Very good.
A few minutes. Again, Amendment 12 introduced inflation language relating to the gas sales contracts from the pipeline to customers. Just to reiterate a bit of what we described earlier, where this makes sense, but we'd suggest that it takes into account the inflation agreed between the project and the customer. That contract, of course, gets reviewed and approved by the RCA, and the project would not object to having a cap on that inflation of 3%. We just suggest that being US CPI, not Alaska CPI.
Please continue.
Amendment 14, summarizing, relates to the state's clawback option, which we discussed at some length in the hearing yesterday. It basically takes the carefully negotiated arrangement between Glenfarne and AGDC and removes all of the careful considerations around it and institutes an automatic reversion to the state with no compensation to the developer in the event that a milestone is lapsed. We'd view that as extremely punitive to the project. Our legal counsel advises us that could potentially qualify as an unconstitutional taking and potentially a violation of the Contracts Clause of the U.S. Constitution, and would severely hinder the developer's ability and willingness to continue to operate in the state of Alaska. What I will say, again, to recap, if there is any concern that actions by the committee to if actions by the legislature to provide tax arrangements for the project were to be put in place, then that value, the monetary value of that tax arrangement would not be factored in for any repurchase that would come up in this scenario. So we'd be supportive of putting that into legislation.
Thank you. Please continue.
Amendment 15 relates to an expansion of the cost overrun language that's already in the bill. The Glenfarne has been supportive for quite some time, on the record very clearly that we do not intend for customers to bear the risk of cost overruns. And we've been supportive of language that was added to the bill saying that customers cannot be exposed to the risk of cost overruns. The Amendment 15 basically, our view is redundant and also fairly confusing. It defines cost overruns using a basis of the original cost estimate. It's unclear what that actually is. It also takes into account the original cost estimate, but also taking into account the final cost.
Okay. All right. we get cost overruns. I'm going to jump forward because I think it's going to take a little bit here. I want to jump forward to the conversation that they have and with regards to the PLAs. And I think that I'm jumping to the right spot. So I hope that I'm get this right. Should be right about here somewhere.
Mr. Prestige, I wanted to ask, just at a high level, as I think there's confusion in the public on the difference between an MOU and a PLA and what about an MOU is binding. Can you please elaborate further on that topic?
Sure, Sharky, happy to do so. The MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, is a contract signed by various parties. It is signed by 8 Star Alaska. It's signed by the Building and Construction Trades Council of South Central Alaska, the Fairbanks Building and Construction Trades Council, and the Alaska Petroleum Joint Crafts Council. It's governed by Alaska law. It's a contract. It sets out a mutual understanding and framework for future project labor agreements between 8 Stars contractors and the building trades. And so it captures a more high level understanding and framework for the future agreements that will be entered into by the contractors themselves. It's anytime you have a contract between 2 parties that's signed, it is assumed to be binding unless there is explicit language calling it non-binding. Sometimes when you sign a memorandum of understanding, the commercial terms are not binding. That is a pretty standard thing in commercial practice. And so I can understand why that confusion might have arisen for some of the media covering this process. However, there's nothing in the MOU that was signed with the labor unions that says that it is non-binding.
Okay, thank you. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kissinger, do you agree with all the statements that were made by Glenn Farn regarding the MOU and PLA agreements?
Senator Hoffman, through the chair, that is also my understanding of the MOU.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments before we move to the next topic? Not seeing any. I'll ask you to continue to your next presentation, which we have pulled up. And I believe we'll be inviting Mr. Steve Mahoney up
Okay, I missed it.
to provide.
So the PLAs were previous, and I got past it. You're absolutely right. This conversation. Why is the state concerned about Glenfarne? Private company has no investment in this project, and they likely never will. And they're trying to oversee. They want this. This goes back to what I was saying. Members of the legislature who approved AGDC in the very beginning, who are still sitting in the chairs, wanted a state-run corporation to be running this project. That's what they wanted to have. They wanted to have partners come in and do the work, build the pipeline, contractors come in, a project developer come in, whatever, but they wanted AGDC to be the controlling interest in the pipeline. And now they don't have that. So they're finding every way that they can through this process, through a very simple tax bill, to try to exercise their control. Glenfarne does not need the legislature's blessing to move forward. Even Wielechowski's been saying it, right? Senator Wielechowski's like, oh, they can just build the pipeline now. They don't need us. Well, they do. They do need you to do the one thing they're asking you to do, which is adjust the tax revenue, reform your tax policy so that it makes the project economical. That's what they're asking you to do. The rest of the conversations about all of these other things, they're all control related. That has nothing to do with what the project really needs. It has everything to do with what the legislature thinks they want. They can't have what they want. It's water under the bridge. They just can't let go. I am backing up. I'm sorry. Okay, right after here somewhere. Okay, let's jump in here and see if this is where it's at.
Project labor, how the project's going to be built, the accommodations and agreements that the project has reached with labor unions. There's a proposal that was passed, an amendment for an expanded project labor agreement requirement that we view as unnecessary. And so I'll take a few minutes here to talk about why that is. And first, I'll give a bit of a history. On June 11th, Glenfarne signed, executed, and announced a binding memorandum of understanding with the building trades councils from Fairbanks and Anchorage. And so what did that do? It set up a framework for future project labor agreements. And just a reminder, the way a project labor agreement is set up is it's not actually between the project and the labor union, it's actually between the contractor that does the construction work or the services on the project and the labor union. The MOU that we signed, it requires an Alaska first labor prioritization, but it recognizes that if there's not adequate personnel or labor in the state of Alaska to fill all of the union roles, then the project contractors can then get a backfill of labor from the US or Canada. As I mentioned, contractors, not the owner, are the ones who sign these agreements. The MOU provides, dedicates significant portions of the project to being committed to be done by labor unions. And so it articulates over a couple different pages of detail what scopes those are. But it does also exclude from work being done by labor unions, specialty work and work that is done out of state. And so a couple of examples of those are when you have original equipment, manufacturer equipment that is produced by a manufacturer and then delivered, they might have very technical, very specialized laborers who work for those manufacturers, specialize in installing those specific pieces of equipment. And so that kind of specialty work is excluded from being done by Alaska labor unions. And then there's a potential for some of the machinery that will be installed for the Alaska LNG project to be fabricated at offsite module yards. That's a highly standard way of building LNG facilities that keeps costs down. And obviously, if we're building large liquefaction or other modules out of state or in international fabrication yards, it wouldn't make any sense for that to be covered by Alaska labor unions. So that's a bit of a highlight of what is in the MOU. It's a binding MOU. There was an unfortunate incident where a reporter mistakenly reported in a headline that is a non-binding MOU. That was factually inaccurate. That was a mistake by that media outlet. I believe it was then subsequently retweeted by the governor's office with the non-binding headline in it. We quickly asked both the reporter and the governor to change those, and I believe that they were both changed. Regardless of what ended up in tweets on X, the language of the MOU is clear. There's nothing in it anywhere that says that it's non-binding, and so we think that was a misunderstanding that was irrelevant by the media. Our position is clear, as it says here on the screen. It's a binding MOU. Just a bit of a graphical representation here. It was a big deal. This labor MOU was negotiated on a very careful, very intensive basis, a lot of time, a lot of meetings, a lot of people involved in a 6-month negotiation process to reach an agreement that worked for both sides. And I think both sides were very happy with the outcome of the negotiation, where a significant portion of the project was allocated to be constructed and worked on by labor unions. and also we were able to put it together in a way that would work for the project's construction plan. So I know that here at the signing ceremony, everyone was very happy and excited, and we continue to be very, very confident and emboldened by the fact that we'll be able to get this project done, relying on the incredible workforce here in the state of Alaska and their ability to accomplish really impressive things. That brings me to the amendment that was proposed on the floor.
And Glenfarne didn't need the legislature to tell them to do that. They didn't need that. They just knew that they were going to need that.
Floor, and which expanded the PLA requirement in the bill. So my understanding is that this was not requested by the labor representatives themselves. That's what I've been told, but that it was instead offered by legislators who were intending to be helpful and make sure that labor's requirements were being met. We think that labor requirements are being met, and I'll walk through some of the ways that they are. But more concerning is that the scope of the amendment that was offered on the floor is very broad and doesn't reflect the careful discussion that the two parties worked on over the course of a 6-month negotiation, and doesn't reflect the level of detail and complication that goes into labor planning for a mega project like this. And so I talked at the outset a little bit about the scope, how there are some exclusions. Most of the significant part of the project is allocated to be worked on by labor unions. The amendment that was proposed removes all of that and simply says all phases, all scopes, all contractors, all subcontractors must sign a PLA. Again, that removes some of the key exclusions that are necessary to actually make the project work, such as off-site fabrication, specialty work, original equipment manufacturer, or work that needs to be done by certified technicians in order to maintain warranties. As written, it applies to labor hours that were performed out of state or internationally, and just frankly doesn't work on a practical level for those reasons on scope.
Not seeing any questions, please continue.
The PLA requires prevailing wages to be paid on all scopes and all elements of the project. Our MOU agrees to pay prevailing wages. It agrees to pay prevailing wages for anyone working on any of the labor elements of the project. That's not the issue. We don't have an objection to that. It even requires prevailing wages to be performed on some of the non-union work that is conducted in state. So that is already accounted for in the MOU itself. The amendment is far broader than that. Doesn't capture kind of the detail and the complications of it. Just says that all work anywhere must be performed, must be paid prevailing wages. Again, if we take the example of some of the off-site fabrication that could be done internationally, paying Alaska prevailing wages at a fabrication yard in Korea, for just one example, doesn't make any sense and wouldn't be economically viable for the project.
Please continue.
A bit of an extension of that point, the MOU already gives the project's commitment to pay prevailing wages. It provides a detailed framework for calculating prevailing wages, including defined rate lock periods, periodic updates to what the prevailing wages are. It aligns with the Alaska Department of Labor wage practices, and really, we think, again, the reason that the project and the labor unions signed the binding MOU is because it adequately addresses the payment of prevailing wages to labor workers.
So the legislature ended up passing an amendment where Glenfarne has already made an agreement with the unions, and somebody who's pro-union in the legislature, or legislators in pro-union, right? They're like, oh, that's not good enough. We know better. We're gonna pass this law that just blanket takes. We don't trust Glenfarne. So we're gonna force Glenfarne to do everything union. Like, doesn't matter what you agreed upon, you're gonna do it our way, right? Back to the control piece. They don't know anything about putting together agreements and building projects. These legislators, they don't know anything about that. They just know that they've got constituents that are union constituents, and they're going to go fight for them. So they're going to stick it to that evil company, that evil private company that's just going to pull a fast one, right? Glenfarne already went out and did the MOU. They didn't have to have the legislature tell them to do it. They already went and did it. Before the legislature ever said boo about taxes, Glenfarne's already working on it. Glenfarne's asking for the legislature do something on taxes. The legislature is focused on anything but that right now. It's all control. It's all politics. Where has Glenfarne done something wrong? In other words, where has Glenfarne done something to warrant the animosity and the distrust and the you have to explain yourself attitude? Frank says in text, he says, where is it here, Frank? It's the people's resource. I assume this is what you're talking about is that somebody should be pushing back on Glenfarne. Who are you sitting next to on your at the table, right? That's AGDC. They should be pushing back on Glenfarne because AGDC is representing us, representing Alaskans. I think if I'm understanding you correctly, right? And my point has been, where has like there is a difference between trust but verify and assume they're doing wrong and force them to prove right, prove that they're not. Okay. Everything that I see coming from these committee meetings is legislators defaulting to, well, it's Glenfarne, so they must be wrong. They must be trying to pull a fast one. They must be lying. They must be not giving us the facts. Everything is Glenfarne's wrong until they can be proven right. This portion of the bill that covers the project labor agreements is another example. It's like, I doubt the legislators even looked at the MOU. I doubt they understood what Glenfarne had actually done. They probably didn't even care to engage. They probably just said, we know best. It doesn't matter what the MOU says. It's non-binding. Doesn't matter. We're just going to put it in statute and then they'll have to do it. It's arrogance. It's demonstrated arrogance. Just trying to control. You've got a handful of legislators that are responsible for this group being in control. Get a handful, and they all have Republican after their name. In the Senate, they've got all Republican after their name. They're the ones that have enabled this nonsense.
Senator Subman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is this the confusion over the binding, non-binding, has it been recognized by the labor organizations that it is binding, or are they still in the opinion that it's not? Or do you know?
Senator Stedman, I don't think there's any question on the labor side that this is a binding agreement. I think there was confusion, or there was a concern that others out there thought that it wasn't, but I certainly believe that they agree that it's binding, want it to be binding. We feel the same way. It just seems that unfortunately some have interpreted it based on those headlines as non-binding, and that might be why some legislators thought it would be helpful to insert this amendment. And so my point here is that we do have a binding MOU, and so that additional legislation is not necessary.
Do you hear Stedman's question? Is it, do the unions still think that it's non-binding? Glenfarne's response is, well, I don't think the unions have ever thought it wasn't. We certainly think it's binding. We're all of our conversation says they think the same thing. This is literally a knee-jerk reaction from somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. Somebody within the legislature, probably a legislator or a staff member, said, hey, you know what? This PLA, or I'm sorry, this MOU, it doesn't say binding in it. Therefore, it's not binding. It needs to say binding. We need to put it in the legislation. We need to add it to the bill. Let's get an amendment. We're going to force it to be binding. They're not going to pull a fast one on us. They don't know what they're doing. Just trying to control things. The assumption is, well, do the unions still think it's non-binding? They've never thought that. There's no evidence to suggest that that's what they thought.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have anything in writing from those unions saying that they believe that it is binding at this point?
Senator Hoffman, I don't have anything from them, but I can just tell you from conversations, I have every expectation that they believe it is binding. I think that's uncontroversial.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Ruffridge.
Thank you, Chair Schrage. Maybe correct my memory for a second. Before we established this amendment that we're discussing, the bill that passed Senate Finance already required a project labor agreement that was binding in order for the tax provisions that we've all been discussing to be implemented. Is that correct?
Representative Ruffridge, through the chair, that's exactly correct. It's another reason why we would make the argument that this isn't necessary, because the bill already had a very clear requirement requiring a project labor agreement for the project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions from committee members? Not seeing any. Please continue.
Thank you, Chair Schrage. I think the last piece that comes up, or maybe not, sorry, second to last piece that comes up in the amendment, pardon me, there's a few more. The next one is the requirement for a broad apprenticeship requirement. And so the language of the amendment says 15% of all hours across the project must be performed by apprentices. I want to be totally clear. We are fully supportive of having an apprenticeship program on the Alaska LNG project. We think it's fantastic. We want to be part of building a workforce for Alaska. We want to be a part of training skilled workers. We want to support that growth and new opportunities and workforce development. But having a bright line 15% requirement creates unworkable challenges for the project. First of all, there's no consideration in the amendment if there weren't available enough personnel to perform 15% of the hours as apprentices. It's a flat requirement. 15% of the hours must be done by apprentices. And so the question would immediately come up, well, if there weren't enough apprentices available to perform that much work, would we lose our tax eligibility? According to the language of the amendment, we would. And so that's a punitive and unworkable risk. There's also not any discussion regarding qualifications or safety elements. And so again, we have no objection to having an apprenticeship program. We'd be very happy to work on the right way to do that. It wasn't something that was requested in the MOU, but we'd be happy to incorporate that into this. And you'll find that our recommendation here at the end is that the bill could and should incorporate some language requiring an apprenticeship program. And so point here is just as written as a broad mandate, it's not workable for the project.
Representative Ruffridge.
Thank you, Chair Schrage. Trying to work through this language and a general question first. this apprenticeship requirement, I can't tell whether it is a requirement that those apprentices are union apprentices. Is that something that you could speak to, or would this include non-union apprenticeships as well?
Representative Ruffridge, through the chair, I can't speak to that. I've got the same language as you, and that's certainly one of the types of details that I'd prefer to work out in a detailed discussion with the unions rather than having it settled in legislation.
Understood. And a follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Follow.
I mean, I assume that of the large scale of work that needs to be performed, not all of the items that need to be done would have union work capacity to do it. Is that something that you can speak to? I mean, there's certainly aspects of the project where you would have to use some non-union workforce in order to accomplish the project. Is that correct?
Representative Ruffridge, through the chair, that is correct. Although I will say our MOU commits very broad scopes of the project to being done by union workers, and we're very happy to have commitments by us and the unions to build this project. I think it's a very good thing for the project. There are, as I said earlier, technical portions where it wouldn't work to be done by union labor because they're either technical or specialized or required in order to maintain warranties. But again, that question that you're asking is discussed in detail in the MOU that we signed.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions from committee members? Not seeing any. Please continue.
Thank you. Another, I guess, Representative Ruffridge, a bit of an additional answer to that. One of the key elements of our signed binding MOU is an agreed labor standard. And so we have an agreement that will prioritize Alaska labor first. That's been something Glenfarne has been committed to since day one of our agreement with AGDC. We've now memorialized it in the binding MOU itself. But we recognize that if there isn't available union labor to do the work required, it does allow for the project to backfill from the U.S. or Canada. Again, if it's backfilled from U.S. or Canada, it would be paid under prevailing wages under the same principles. And so you don't have that kind of labor arbitrage concern. There's also what I would call as a project protection, which is that the workforce must be qualified and competitive. And so if anyone's working on this project, we are 100% committed to our first principle of safety first. And so first and foremost, we need qualified workers who can deliver a project safely. And so the MOU preserves that principle that we'll have qualified workers building the project.
Senator Stebbins.
Help me a little bit.
There's going to be a shortage of people because Alaska does not have them qualified, right? Frank, your statement is it's not binding. I don't know where you come by that. Even if the MOU does not have the word binding in it, if it ever went to court. That's the thing about providing testimony at a legislative hearing like this, is this is on the record. This is part of the record. It will be kept for posterity. And if it ever went to court, those taking Glenfarne to court would play this, and the president of of the project, right? The head honcho who was sitting in the legislative office here, right? The committee room saying, well, we thought it was binding. If they're claiming the opposite 6 months or a year or 5 years down the road, they're saying, oh no, we didn't think it was binding. And they're standing in front of an arbitrator or a judge. And all they do is all the opposition does is cue up the video of him saying this. And it becomes binding. Just because it didn't say it wasn't binding, he would have no leg to stand on. They would have no leg to stand on. It's part of the record. He's considering it on the record for posterity's sake, considering it a binding agreement. It would be binding. I don't understand why anybody would say it's not binding, because it doesn't have the word binding in it. I don't think that's a good enough reason. Yeah, this is the point. and I was trying to come up with a number myself, Chris, as I was thinking through this. I'm like, are we going to be able to field even a quarter of the people, of the labor here in Alaska qualified? I mean, anybody who's qualified is probably trying to work in the oil field right now. Are those people going to disappear? ConocoPhillips and Hillcorp going to lose people that are going to go build a pipeline? Welders, right? I mean, maybe. There's going to be a massive influx of workers from out of the state of Alaska because we cannot fill it. There's no way. There's no way. I would be surprised. I would be shocked if we even have a quarter of the workforce in Alaska. And if we do, if they are able to find a quarter of the qualified workforce, that means the other employers in the state are scrambling to bring people from out of state to backfill those people who just left. That's what that means. State employees the same way, Frank. If you've got state welders and they want to jump over to help build a pipeline for a couple of years, the state's going to be scrambling to find people. They'll have to hire them from wherever they can. I mean, I don't know that the state employs welders. Maybe they do, but can't be in large numbers. All right, let's finish this.
With the pension guarantee or pension backfill, there's some pension clause in there also.
Senator Stedman, that's something that we spent a fair bit of time working with the labor unions on. It relates to, in some instances, a project can be liable or be on the hook for underfunded pensions. And some unions have pensions that are underfunded. And so what we agreed to talk about, what we agreed to solve in our definitive project labor agreements is how we would solve issues where a union is starting the work and starting with an underfunded pension already. And so we want to make sure that the project's not held accountable to fund, to top up an underfunded pension for work that was done prior to the project.
Okay, thank you. Please continue.
Let's see. Again, just to highlight the MOU that we signed, again, negotiated over the course of 6 months, very detailed. The MOU considers the reality that there are multiple phases, multiple work packages, numerous construction contractors, and reflects an agreement between the project and the counterparties, between the project and the unions to address all of those different phased elements of the project. And so that type of phasing, that type of detail isn't reflected in the amendment. As I mentioned, at the end of the day, the PLAs will be signed not between the owner and the unions, but there will be numerous PLAs signed between the contractors themselves and the unions performing the work. Again, that's something that should be, that was too broadly stated in the amendment.
You see how he worded that, and he's worded this numerous times during this conversation, right? The PLA is not going to be signed between the owner and the unions. It is between the contractors and the unions. This goes back to AGDC being the owner of the project. They are no longer owner, they're minority owner, right? That's where these legislators wanted it to be. The state, AGDC owns the pipeline. They want to be the owner. We're not signing agreements with unions, but we'll force the contractors to sign agreements with the unions, right? This is what the intention was all along for decades, was for the state to be the owner. They're no longer the owner. and these legislators are butthurt over it. It's the underlying problem that we have in our legislature.
Please continue.
Thank you. Last of the issues, a bit of a recap on the safety concern with apprenticeships. We have every expectation that the unions would put together a safe program. That apprentices in Alaska would do fantastic work and be just top-notch apprentices that could work on a project anywhere. Just top-notch apprentices. We law a requirement that the PLAs entered into will be substantially consistent with the binding MOU that was already executed between the project developer, between Glenfarne and the building trades councils. As I said, we have an agreement in place. Glenfarne stands by it with full commitment. And if we're asked to put that agreement into law as a legal requirement, we're totally okay with that. We are very grateful and thrilled to have this project be worked on by the incredible labor force of the state of Alaska. We just needed to have the laws and regulations that apply to the project be conducive to actually financing it and getting lenders and investors to put the money in to build it. The last point is, in addition to adding language to the bill that would mandate the MOU and basically make the MOU legally, make the MOU the requirement of the legislation, we'd be fully supportive of taking an additional step to have the legislation require that the project establish an apprenticeship program that is consistent with industry standards and would be negotiated between the project and the appropriate labor union. So we'd be very happy to include that. Again, these are not substantive. I wouldn't call these substantive labor concerns. I think you saw we're very proud of the signing ceremony we had with the unions. We're very proud of the role that they'll play on this project. We just need the legislation to be written the right way. And so I would call these more, legislative drafting issues than anything else. So that's my last slide. I appreciate the attention.
All right. When you read what's being read, what's been written out there, and what you hear from other legislators and people who are dogging this, right? I just want you to ask yourself, is there some thread of truth or proof that Glenfarne has done something wrong or done something to warrant the behavior that's coming at them? Like there's this concept out here, and I'll be brief. There's this concept out, it's our resource. It's the people's resource. Constitutionally, it's our resource. And Glenfarne just wants to pillage it. Really? Well, they're going to make a huge profit. We've got to know their financials. Give us all of your information. You got to be transparent. Really? Because Glenfarne is going to pull a fast one on you? Like, is there anything that we've seen thus far that would say that's realistic? It's reasonable. What we've heard is that the project is marginal. Yes, we're talking big dollars, right? Many billions of dollars over the lifetime of the project, okay? Who else is going to build the project? Who else is going to build the pipeline? It's not you. It's not any of the people out there who are the naysayers. We've got plenty of naysayers. Project's never going to happen. They're never going to be able to build it. Blah, 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 right? Those people are not going to build a pipeline. So what is it about Glenfarne? What is it about the situation with this private company and the human beings that make up this effort, right? What is it about them that warrants automatically writing them off and having to prove themselves? Like, I get it, trust but verify, right? You've got to ask good questions, but that's not where the legislature's at. They're not trust but verify. They're we don't like you, And we're going to make you jump through all of these hoops, right? We don't trust you. We're going to put amendments on these bills that force you to do things the way we want. For what reason? What is the evidence out there that it's warranted, that it's necessary, needed, or called for? Glenfarne has been bending over backwards to try to make this project work and try to bring Alaskans along with it. That's the biggest problem here, is that Alaskans don't know what to do. They don't know how to behave. They don't know how to develop pipelines. They don't know how to win. They don't know how to win. It's popular in Alaska to pick on the companies that come up from out of state. Oh, all those out-of-state oil companies come in here and they just pillage Alaska. Okay, well, create an in-state company to go do it. What's stopping you? What's stopping you? We got some wealthy people in Alaska. What's stopping you from doing what outside companies come in and do? I think you just don't know how to win. I just think you don't know how to do it. It's far easier to criticize others. It's like the crabs in the bucket. One of them figures out how to climb out, and the crabs underneath claw onto them and pull them back down in. There's a little bit of that, or maybe a lot of that, going around in our legislature and around our community. How dare Glenfarne come in here and actually try to win? They're trying to do something huge. They're trying to do something that many people are skeptical about. Don't let that skepticism turn into opposition. If you say you're for the pipeline, but you're skeptical, that's fair. If you say you're for the pipeline, but you put roadblocks in the way, that's not fair. That's like being a liar. Yes, I'm for the pipeline, but here's a roadblock and I want you to jump over it. And here's another one, and here's another one. And I'm not actually going to address the tax issue that you say you need. Representative Sinclair's got a really good point. The membership makeup of this committee is made up of mostly people who aren't even on the road system. They don't even have a dog in the fight with respect to natural gas coming to their house or their business, or being able to utilize natural gas, right? But let's not kid each other, right? The value of natural gas along the rail belt helps in many other ways. If we're able to realize lower cost gas, then that helps reduce the cost of business in Alaska. And that has an impact on business that is spread out from the urban area to rural or more rural areas. It lowers the cost of doing business. And that has effects in other areas, okay? So this isn't for legislators who are like, yeah, this doesn't touch me, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it does. It's like saying, I'm in the interior, so the Port of Alaska doesn't really matter to me because it's an Anchorage issue. Nope, that is completely short-sighted as well, because your goods and services, your goods that are coming in on a barge, on a boat, come through the port, the costs go up because they got to redo this port, and you're paying for it. You're going to pay for it on higher cost goods. It's just like if we're importing gas, or you got to go get gas in Cook Inlet, the cost is going to go up because we got to go get it. And any business that is tied to gas or electricity that services remote areas or is connected to remote areas in any way, or another way to think about it is, if somebody in a remote area is coming to the rail belt for services or any kind of business, well, it means when you come here, it's more expensive. If energy is more expensive, if you reduce the cost of energy, then it becomes less expensive for you. So it is not accurate. You don't have the same connection as people who are going to have gas flowing to their house, but it isn't that you have no connection. So this is an Alaska-wide project. It has ramifications for everybody in Alaska. Everybody benefits when we reduce the cost of doing business in Alaska, which is reducing the cost of energy. These legislators who are standing in the way are doing so because they think they want to control the project. They are butthurt. They need to get over it. Hopefully, in the next couple of days, we're going to see some sort of action from this committee. I think on the 1st of July is when the legislature is supposed to gavel in or come back on the next session of 4 sessions. The bodies will meet. So that's the day where you're going to hear whether they're going to waive their rules. If they're going to waive their rules and give this committee the ability to amend this bill, then you can imagine that they're going to have a CS that changes the underlying bill. In some cases, that's what Glenn Farn is pointing to, that it needs to happen. Okay, well then how are we going to do it? You either have to, you're going to have to trust somebody. If these, I don't know, you can't send it back to Senate Resources because they're not going to fix it. Senate Finance, they're not going to fix it. I don't know. Maybe these 6 people are the only ones in the legislature, as much as maybe they would like it to be different, right? They would rather a different structure. Maybe these are the 6 that can get the job done. I don't know. You might be hard pressed with these 2 majorities to find another committee that could do better than the conference committee. So maybe I'm making an argument right now for waiving your rules and allowing these people to get it done. I don't know. What other committee would you send it to where it would have a better shot at getting done? I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. The bill came out of House Finance fine, so maybe you could send it to House Finance, but then it would have to go through the process and go back to the Senate, and that'd be a mess. So as much as it would frustrate me for a process guy and wanting to see the rules followed, you know what? The legislature gets to waive the rules. They live with the results. These 6 people fix the problem. Great. Everybody goes home a winner. They screw it up. Everybody goes home a loser. So much is riding on this. Yeah, Chris, that's exactly right. There's a lot of there's other business that would benefit from low cost energy that is looking at this and saying, heaven help us if we have to go to the legislature for anything. Dean says, Ben, if I can't build it and Glenn Farn says they can, they must be lying because I know everything and I can't. So they must be lying. That's right. It is part of our American culture right now. And it is extremely frustrating that people who cannot criticize those who can. Craig says he thinks it's a legitimate knock on Glenn Farn in its short history and relatively thin experience. Yeah, well, the same could be said for other successful companies that have figured it out, right? Look at SpaceX. It's easy to go to Elon Musk's companies and say, well, that kind of blows everything out of the water, but it's got Elon Musk, right? He's proven himself. But the argument, I think, is a valid one. Their lack of success does not mean that they can't be successful. When I spoke to, I was to say Mr. Glenn Farn, but when I spoke to, I'm drawing a blank on his name, Duvall. Brandon Duvall. He said this was a stretch for them. This is bigger than anything that they had done. But their projects that they had done up till now prepared them, he thought, really well to take a next step and up their game to a larger project. That's what he said. He recognized it. He recognized that they hadn't done anything this large before, but this was what they had done and had prepared them, he thought, for moving up to a larger project. Again, what has Glenfarne done thus far to warrant not having trust, not having faith, not giving them the benefit of the doubt, not helping them move forward? You can be skeptical and still enable somebody and help them move forward because you want them to be successful. I don't think you're going to get it, but I mean, you think about it with your children. You're like, they want to do something big and you're like, I know you. I really don't think you should try this, but you know what? I hope you're successful because you'll learn something. And if you fail, you'll learn something. So I'm going to help you. I'm going to support you in your effort here. Why would the state of Alaska and why would people not take that approach with Glenfarne? Yeah, we haven't found anybody else that wants to build it. So I'm really surprised that you're trying to bite this off. You haven't done anything this big before. What can we do to help you? Because we're kind of in short supply of people who want to do it. Why not take that approach? Why not take the positive attitude that says, you know what, Glenfarne, maybe they've bitten off more than they can chew. So what can we do to help them be successful? Because if they're successful, we're successful. The exact opposite is kind of happening in our society, in our culture here. Like, Glenfarne's got to be, they've got to prove. They got to prove it to us before we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt, or I don't know. It's just a negative mindset that I just don't understand. Do you want a pipeline or not? Glenfarne's here. They're who you've got. It doesn't hurt you in the least to give them your support and wish them the best. Remove the roadblocks where possible and hope for the best. Doesn't hurt us in the bit. Doesn't cost us anything. If they fail, you do not have somebody waiting in the wings to pick it up. They drop the baton, the race is over. There's nobody coming behind them. Not immediately. This is not high competition. Anyway. All right. Well, maybe a CS tomorrow, maybe a meeting tomorrow. I haven't even looked to see if there was a notice tonight. I've got the website up. Let me just check and see if there's a meeting notice for daily schedule. Next day for the nothing scheduled for the 30th right now. Okay. Maybe they'll have a meeting tomorrow, maybe not. All right, we will be back and we will have a chat with you when there's more information to be had from the state legislature. Stay tuned. Look, if you're looking on Facebook, follow us. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, share, like it. Help get the message out. Tell your friends if they got questions about the project or they got questions about the legislature. Jump on the show at 7 p.m. and ask the question and get your answers, get your questions answered. All right. Help spread the word. We'll see you next time. Have a good night.